Hello everyone, welcome back to Go-Gib. Today we will learn the summary of The Rovers by Aphra Behn. So first, we will learn about the author, Aphra Behn. The first English woman to make a living from her writing, Aphra Behn worked in multiple genres as a celebrated playwright, novelist, and poet. Little is known about her early life and origins. Thought to be born in 1614, she may have been the daughter of a man named Johnson, who was related to English nobleman Francis Lord Willoughby. Scholars do know Behn joined Johnson and his family on a voyage to Suriname, an English colony in South America in 1663. Willoughby was in charge of Suriname before the Dutch seized the colony from the English. Behn spent several months in Suriname before returning to England. The voyage influenced her greatly. Behn married Johann Behn, a Dutch merchant, in 1664. Her husband died, or the couple separated the next year. To earn a living, Behn became a British spy for King Charles II and traveled to the Netherlands in the Secret Service. Charles II didn't send her the promised funds for her journey home, so she borrowed to pay her way. Back in England, she was imprisoned for debt. When she was released from prison, Behn was determined to support herself and began writing for a living. So, let's focus on the important characters. So here we see Helena. She is basically the main character after Wilmore. So we see Helena, Florinda, and Don Pedro. Those three are siblings. And Gallus is Helena's and Florinda's governess. Then we have Wilmore, who is the rover. Belville, who is the English colonel. Frederick, who is the English gentleman. Blunt, who is the rich English country gentleman. So these four are friends. Then we have Angelica Bianca. She is a famous courtesan. Then is Lucita, and another is Don Antonio. He is the viceroy's son. Okay, let's see the summary of Act 1, Scene 1. Scene 1 opens with Florinda and Helena, the daughters of a noble Spanish family, engaged in conversation in a chamber. Helena, destined to become a nun, asks her sister about love. She is particularly curious about her sister's latest love interest. Florinda brushes off her sister's curiosity, claiming that she cannot possibly understand love as she has never been a lover. Helena proceeds to talk about an English colonel named Belville, whom their brother brought to visit Florinda. Mention of Belville makes Florinda blush, and Helena continues to list possible suitors who might be the reason behind Florinda's apparently love-struck state. When Helena mentions Don Vicencio, a rich old man whom the girl's father wants Florinda to marry, Florinda makes clear that she hates Vicencio and has no intention of marrying him. Helena continues to press her sisters for answers, insisting that it is Belville for whom she pines. Florinda reminds her sister that as a maid destined to become a nun, she should not be so curious about her sister's love life. In response, Helena reveals that she too has no intention of carrying out the designs that her father has made for her. She is asking her sister about love and Belville because she hopes that he has some mad companion that will spoil her devotion. Helena subsequently makes known her plans to attend the upcoming citywide carnival. Helena continues to ask her sister about Belville, and Florinda eventually reveals that she knew the English colonel before he arrived in Naples and that she is in love with him. The sister's brother, Don Pedro, enters the chamber, along with his servant Stefano and the girl's governess, Gallus. Pedro asks Florinda when she last saw Don Vicencio, her lover. She replies that she does not know, for she cares not. Don Pedro reminds her sister that their father commands that she love Vicencio for his vast fortune, and because Vicencio has a passion for her. As he puts on his masquerade outfit for the carnival, Florinda tells her brother that she hates Vicencio and that she has confidence in her brother's ability to divert their father's will to have marry such a man. She proceeds to tell her brother that she values the Colonel Belvoir for having protected her when she was in danger during a conquest in Pamplona. Pedro respects his sister's admiration for the colonel but implores her to consider the wealth of Vicencio. Florinda maintains that her youth and beauty should not be wasted on such an old man that she has no feelings for, regardless of his fortune. As Don Pedro continues to argue that fortune must be considered before heroic acts, Helena joins the conversation, arguing against Florinda's marrying Vicencio for his money. Helena proceeds to voice her opinion regarding such an arranged marriage, deeming her sister's predicament even worse than her own. Helena suggests that the son of Viceroy Don Antonio would be a better fit for Florinda. Tired of her outspoken insolence, Don Pedro instructs Callis to lock Helena up for the duration of the carnival that is about to take place in the city. After commanding Callis to lock up Helena, Don Pedro tells Florinda that if he had it his way, she would marry Don Antonio rather than Don Vicencio. Like his sisters, he too hates Vicencio. Florinda agrees to go along with her brother's plan. Helena pleads with Callis to refrain from locking her up. Initially resistance to Helena's pleas, Callis is eventually convinced to let both of the girls attend the carnivals if they wear disguises and allow her to supervise them. Helena wants to enjoy her freedom, she claims, before becoming a devout nun for the rest of her life. Act 1, Scene 2. In this scene, which takes place in a long street, we are introduced to Colonel Belvoir and two of his friends, an English gentleman named Frederick and an English countryman named Blunt. Belvoir's friends have noticed his melancholic air and ask him what is bothering him. Frederick divines that the source of Belvoir's melancholy is Florinda, a Spanish woman that he met in Pamplona, and who also happened to be a noble woman from Naples. Belvoir reveals that Frederick has guessed correctly. It is his dismal chances at winning her over that have him so upset. Belvoir tells his friends that Florinda's brother Pedro is determined to marry her to Don Antonio. Belvoir himself had hardly competed with Antonio. He says because the potential suitor is wealthy, Spanish, and a friend of Florinda's brother. Wilmore, a rover, the friend of Belvoir's, arrive and all greet him joyously. Wilmore has been at sea for an indeterminate amount of time with the prince, that is Prince Charles II. Frederick asks him why he is ashore and whether the prince is okay. Wilmore reveals that all is well and that he has come to Naples simply to spend some time at the carnival. He must head out to sea again in a day or two. As Belvoir and Wilmore discuss the strangeness of the way in which sex is sold in Italy and Florinda, Helena and Valeria enter dressed as gypsies, followed by Callis, Stefano, Lucetta, Filippo, and Sancho, all dressed in masquerade. Wilmore approaches Helena and asks her what luck he might have in taking her home. She warns him to be careful around her, as she is a gypsy and may very well pick his pocket. He tells her that he has spent much time at sea and would like her to take some of his love, which has been building up out on the water. Helena implies that she would sleep with him if only she weren't destined to become a nun. Wilmore disdains her plan to become a maid and vows to help her get out of her predicament. Meanwhile, Lucetta spots Blunt as an obvious foreigner because he is staring at her and strutting about. She speaks to Sancho about her plans to lure him in. Florinda approaches Belvoir and pretends to read his palm. Belvoir is wary of the practice and makes an effort to get away from Florinda, who grabs him and refuses to let him leave until he confesses whether he truly loves Florinda. At the mention of her name, Belville is suddenly interested. Florinda tells him to wait for her at the garden gate later that night. Belville vows to obey just as Don Pedro enters with several other masked carnival attendees. Florinda hands Belville a letter and then leaves. Frederick warns Belville that the letter may be a trick designed by Florinda's brother Pedro to destroy him. But Belville tells Frederick not to disturb his happiness with doubts and proceeds to open the letter. As Belville reads the letter, Wilmore can be heard wooing Helena. She vows to meet with him later, and all women leave the scene except for Lucetta. After examining Florinda's letter, which again instructs Belville to meet her in the garden at 10 o'clock that night, Belville recruits his friends to help him rescue his love from the threatened violence of her brother, who is planning to have her married to his friend Don Antonio. Meanwhile, Blunt leaves with Lucetta and the conversation shifts to a new topic. The famous Paduana Angelica Bianca is in town and has put herself up for monthly sale. Wilmore tells Belville that he wants to pay her a visit. Belville agrees to accompany him to her castle after they dine. Act 2, Scene 1. Belville and Frederick are walking with Wilmore towards Angelica's house when Blunt appears. Blunt is evidently smitten with his night with Lucetta. She did not charge him for her services and she is expecting him again later in the evening. The four men arrive at Angelica's house where two bravos are in process of hanging a picture of Angelica against the balcony and two little ones at each side of the door. Upon seeing her picture, Wilmore expresses once again his desire for her, but is disheartened by the steep monthly fee that he cannot afford. Don Pedro arrives with Stefano, both in masquerade. The Englishmen walk off for a moment and Pedro announces that he will buy Angelica for what he considers a bargain price of 1,000 crowns. Angelica appears on the balcony with her servant Moretta, and they discuss potential buyers. Angelica admits that she is flattered by the wonders of the Englishman, but she ultimately decides that her interest lies with a man willing to pay the most for her. Don Pedro arrives in costume with Stefano. Don Antonio enters at another door with his page, also in costume. Both men make known their desire to purchase Angelica. When Antonio's page encourages him to purchase Angelica, despite being promised to Florinda, Don Pedro is made aware that his competitor is in fact Antonio. Angelica plays the lute from up above and then parts the balcony curtains and bows to Don Antonio, who removes his mask and blows her kisses. Pedro watches on, angry and disturbed at his friend's dalliance. When Antonio inquires about purchasing Angelica, Pedro tells him that he is too late, for he has already made an offer. The two men draw and begin to fight, with Blunt and Wilmore jump in to separate the quarreling Spaniards. Pedro, who remains in disguise, tells Antonio that he wants to fight him the next day, not for Angelica, but rather to defend Florinda's honor. Antonio mistakenly thinks that the disguised Pedro is Belville, for he cannot imagine any other man who would be angry with his disrespecting of Florinda. He agrees to fight him. Pedro and Stefano leave. Meanwhile, Wilmore has been gazing at the picture of Angelica and pulls down one of the little ones. Antonio orders him to restore the picture, and Angelica appears once more above. Curious about the exchange between the two men, a fight erupts between the Englishmen and the Spaniards. The Spaniards are beaten off, and Angelica invites Wilmore into her house. Act 2, Scene 2. Wilmore has entered Angelica's chamber, where she questions him regarding the reason he pulled down her picture. This was, unbeknownst to Wilmore, a great sign of disrespect. Wilmore argues that the real crime lies in putting up so beautiful and tempting a picture and expecting men not to pull it down. Rather than apologize, Wilmore chides Angelica for selling scene, that is sex, and then proceeds to barter with her, so that he might buy her for a couple days rather than the whole month. As Wilmore explains that he is too poor to purchase her for the month, she begins to fall for him. They have a long exchange, and Wilmore is able to win her over with words. She professes that he need not pay her in money for her love, only give her his heart. Wilmore and Angelica withdraw, and Moretta, Angelica's lady in waiting, is left to comment on how ridiculous an unpaid relationship is. Act 3, Scene 1. Florinda, Helena, and Valeria are on the street in different costumes, all attended by Callis. Helena has not been able to stop thinking about Wilmore and is partly uneasy with the thought of him being with any other woman but her. Belleville, Frederick, and Blunt appear, and the women step aside to listen in on their conversation. Belleville and Blunt knock at the residence of Angelica in search of Wilmore. Helena watches on, aware that it is her man for whom they are searching at the house of the reputed courtesan. Wilmore emerges, boasting of his success with Angelica. He suggests they all go out to celebrate. Sancho enters and pulls Blunt aside to tell him that Lucetta is expecting him. The two men leave together. Helena approaches Wilmore as he is telling Belleville that Angelica has nearly allowed him to forget all about Helena. However, as soon as she makes her presence known, Wilmore begins once again to court Helena. As Wilmore and Helena flirt, Angelica enters in costume with Moretta and some other servants. She observes as Wilmore interact with Helena and is surprised to see him so clearly fond of her. Helena removes her mask and Wilmore flatters her excessively until Angelica can endure no more and withdraws. Before she leaves, however, she instructs Sebastian, one of her bravos, to follow Helena and learn more about her. Meanwhile, Florinda approaches Belleville in disguise and attempts to woo him with a jewel. Although tempted to accept, he tells the disguised Florinda that he has made a vow to another lady, that is Florinda, and therefore cannot accept. At the same time, Helena continues to question Wilmore. She asks him what he was doing at Angelica's house. Wilmore lies to her and tells her that he was visiting a male friend there. At this point, Helena reveals to Wilmore that she overheard him speaking moments earlier about his conquest to Belleville. Helena tells Wilmore that he can only see her again if he promises to never again see Angelica. Wilmore kneels and swears, and the two agree to meet the next day. Before the women leave, Florinda gives Belleville a jewel with her picture on it, which cues him into the fact that she is Florinda. Act 3, Scene 2. Lucetta has invited Blunt back to her house. She tells Blunt that she loves him and then retires to her bedroom to undress and wait for him. Sancho comes to fetch Blunt and tells him that Lucetta is ready for him in her chamber. Act 3, Scene 3. Blunt arrives at Lucetta's bedroom and takes Sancho's candle at the door before heading in. Blunt gets undressed, and as he heads toward Lucetta's bed, she asks him to blow out the candles. Blunt blows out the candle, but then he has trouble finding the bed. Meanwhile, Lucetta has snuck out of the bed to meet with Filippo, her gallant, and Sancho, her pimp, to look over all of Blunt's possession. They tally the bounty and comment on the foolishness of the duped Englishman. 3. Scene 4. Blunt has been duped by Lucetta and is now emerging from a common shore, dirty and in disbelief at having been cheated. He laments his poor fortune and chastises himself for being so naive and imperceptive. His plan is to get back home to England if at all possible. It is nightmare.